Hello, my name's Robert Nelson and I'm looking for conversational space, especially at university. And I'm thinking of something like a courtyard, a place that encloses us, makes us feel comfortable for conversation. So here's an example, a ground plan of the Stoa in Athens, which is a colonnade. And it's one of many spaces that have existed in antiquity and Renaissance. That fancy Greek word there, platia, is actually the origin of our word place, which is also there in Italian, the piazza. So a colonnade could look like this, fronts onto land, and equally, this genius of the courtyard or civic square, town square, is very conversational, and here's an example from Italy. So contemporary realities are a little bit different, and in fact I think realities were always a bit different. And you can imagine when artists looked at learning spaces, they idealised it. So here's an example of outdoor learning space that looks a lot like indoor learning space by Raphael around 1500 in the Vatican. And there are people learning outdoors. But our realities are different, and we do notice that there's a lack of one big ingredient, I think, and that is this idea of a concourse. We tend to have paths connecting buildings. They're not exactly, they're locked into gardens, I think is the thing that I notice most. And they're kind of beautiful, but paved space is not preferred, and it's really seen as what you would do for a path. So that is something that relates to a lot of urban trends that occurred throughout the 20th century that we would love to investigate further. The result is that we tend to have buildings that are, in a way, garden locked. And they kind of, if they're ugly buildings, that is, in a way, disguised by the gardens. It sort of suits us. We're happy enough to look at trees and I think the look of it is okay, but when you start to think about what it's useful for, it really unravels a bit. And it's not as if we're just looking at old buildings and we now know better. Because in fact, I think we probably know even less than we did a long time ago. And come back to this, the theme of the business park or the research park. So it's all in contrast to what is in a courtyard. Courtyard almost echoes with our own social presence. There people get together and they're in a sense sequestered from the winds and the ambient noise, and hear one another's vocally generated noise much more. So our beautiful parkscapes that we've generated for universities have this kind of non-conversational dimension that has to do with feet in a way not really being that welcome or kept to the path, which means in a way that the space isn't really yours. And even when we've got a courtyard space, so this was established over time from the 1930s through to now, and we've now interpreted for a courtyard, and of course we've filled it up with garden. And I reckon that if this space existed in Australia, we'd have to have a garden in there. We'd have it on lots of levels so you couldn't really be there. And that's what it would look like. Lots of different levels. Can't really go over the edge because that's crunch, crunch, crunch. So this talk is not a polemic against trees because I love them, but not only that, they archive carbon. Grass and shrubs don't really do that because their life cycle is so short. Trees are great. They work fantastically well in urban contexts. They define space. They break up the appearance of buildings, but they do not interrupt pedestrians. I notice that where we have trees, and I should say I'm taking examples not just from my own university, but the other large group of 8 university in my state in Australia, Victoria, which these are actually the leading universities in Australia. So I'm not picking on the weakies. These are the big guys. And so here's a tree, would be very focal, beautiful thing, but it's got a garden around it. And it means in a way that I can't really be there and enjoy the tree quite the same way. In the same way that these beds, beautiful in their own right, really deny that I can be there. So most of the campus, and sometimes they're big campuses, sometimes they're not, gobbled up by these gardens. Here's an example of a very small campus, and there's space for shrubs, but I'm not sure that there's that much space for me. So they're nice, they kind of look good, but I think we have to ask, what are they doing? And above all, what do they serve in creating conversational space that extends our learning environment? And I think that they really are quite anti-public. They're put there for the sake of the public, but in fact they keep the public out. And this public is us. That's the students and the faculty, the professors, the tutors. They too really can't congregate in any of these spaces, even when they're contemporary. This is the trend. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. So here's a gorgeous opportunity between buildings, a lovely courtyard, and what do I see? Something where I can't be, and that's of course created by concrete paths and a gully there that looks like a swamp. I fear snake bite, and can't even get close to the buildings, and really have to stick to this this image from the countryside, ecological precinct, but not a conversational one. So you might say, oh, Robert, you're being a bit harsh. After all, not everything has to be paved. We'd get bored. Keep your pavement for the centre of a campus. The problem is when you go looking for this centre, it's kind of hard to find because it's all gardenised. And so here's the centre of a campus, very illustrious, but I can't see the centre. I can see a garden, it kind of looks nice, but this sure isn't a place for people to meet. And this occurs even where you have very, very large auditoria, like for a graduation where people want to spill out and talk. They can't really gather that much because there isn't space for them, because we've taken up a big triangle in the middle of paths. It's filled up with a garden. And that's all the way along. Come on, move along, move along. We've got garden to do here. We've got gardening to protect. That's not for you. That's grass, please. Kindly stick to the path. And we can almost sense the landscape literally bristling. So again, you could say, well, Robert, I think you're being a bit harsh here. After all, what we're doing with these gardens is we're breaking down that nasty institutionality of tall buildings, and we're providing little pockets, the coulisses, the bosquet, the little nook. And up to a point, that's true. But the problem is, once you create nooks, you've kind of also kept people out, because the purpose of the message of the nook is that it's for two or three. And that means that it's not for a gathering. It's not for lots of people who have feet. It's for people, a few, who have the use of their bottom for the purpose. So here we've got nooks, and I don't see in them any symbol of a learning community. There's no community invoked. And I guess wherever the land swells out, the road is larger, and you could accommodate people, we make sure that it's consumed by garden. So there is our experience, in a way, taken away in some of its potential for conversation by garden. It often looks nice. Sometimes it's quite, it's beautifully engineered, like you get nice thickets and so on. Have security anxiety sometimes, but let's not go there. Open space is balanced with dense space. I think that's clever. And open space is actually more of an embarrassment in many ways than this kind of thing, because when you've got open space, it's of course traumatized by feet. So the evidence of its incompatibility with the public is there for all to see, and this is the degradation that you will always see of grass wherever there are people. It's very telling, and in a way confesses that we have no use for the land that isn't accommodated by furniture and so on. And in fact, the land ends up looking like rubbish, which is a real shame, because I can assure you that is very expensive land to be turning into rubbish. It's a lost opportunity. We're all the time having to ward off people, and aesthetically or otherwise, and here's just a nasty old grill to remind you of your place. And so I have some qualms about why we're dedicating all that land to so little use. And it has an architectural impact too. The buildings, of course, came first, and they're not particularly beautiful buildings often in our terms. But buildings really are denied any relationship with the street, or the concourse as I'm calling it, and set back without any scope for engagement with you. So there we are again, a possibility for socialised space denied. And so I promised to come back to this idea of business park. Business park's really a kind of office that you get to by car. And so you tend to have buildings surrounded by park plus car park. And it's a really dominating motif, even in city campuses. And you can kind of recognise it by the look of buildings, in a sense, flown in, which are often actually incredibly imaginative and win prizes, like the courtyard earlier. But in fact, the underlying structure of these things is automotive. And look, you could just scroll through lots of them. Some of them are glamorous, some of them just willfully look industrial, some of them are sort of platonic, but in their abstraction really say we're very snazzy, we're great places for science, but in fact we're not places for people at all. You get here by car and then you concentrate in the lab, or your studio, your study. And so we've kind of gone the opposite direction internationally from the idea of the platea or piazza or courtyard. These are the most unlike a courtyard, even when there is one. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to leave you with these really quite imponderable issues about organising space. It's not for us to do, it's for us to ponder. Some of us are architects, and it's definitely for them to ponder, but it's for all of us to think about what we really want, and then to build our conversations into the environments that we have. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to me. There is more about this in general, which of course our reading would take us further in any field. So thanks for listening, and good luck in your speculations. Bye.